Welcome to Successful Project Management for Non-Project Managers, practical tools and techniques for everyday success. Why does this course matter? To help you create structure out of chaos. Our agenda today, I'll give a quick introduction of myself, the course objectives and outcomes. We'll talk about project management foundations for non-project managers, just touching at a high level. We'll identify success factors. We'll talk about record keeping that tie back to success factors, and some tips, some do's and don'ts with regards to project management. And then we'll wrap everything up in a conclusion. So let's get started with the introduction. First, myself. I am Alex Fullick. I have 30 years in operational resilience, business continuity management, IT disaster recovery, project management, crisis management, and many other areas, but all related to the same basic industry. I have multiple certifications in this industry. I've authored 8 books. I've spoken at numerous conferences around the globe, all across Canada and the US, Australia, UK, South Korea, and even China and other places. I am the managing director and founder of Stone Road, a consulting contracting company, and we've worked in financial institutions, insurance, government agencies, public utilities, and many others. And I'm proud to say I am the creator and host of the very first podcast dedicated to this business continuity, operational resilience industry, Preparing for the Unexpected, which we started back in July 2017, and we've got a YouTube channel of the same name. Our objectives today: recognize how project management improves resilience and results, learn practical tools to manage work, people, and expectations, and to gain confidence in planning, communicating, and delivering those outcomes, and identify how to get your project under control, especially if you already are a project manager and you're experiencing some issues and problems. Going through this course will help you identify just where those might be coming from and why. Our outcomes for the day: understand what a project is and isn't. Learn the project management lifecycle at a high level. We won't go into all the details. There are many other courses you can take with regards to that. We'll talk about record keeping. We'll go into more detail of what that means so you understand what it is you should be recording. It will certainly help you communicate better with stakeholders because you will have a better understanding of where things stand and how to communicate and what leadership are looking for, and you will be better positioned to manage risk, issues, and change, and you'll be able to do it with confidence. So let's get started with part 1, Project Management Foundations. These are the basics everyone needs to understand. What is a project? Well, there are many definitions and methodologies with regards to project management. Some of them you may hear called Agile, Scrum, Kanban, Lean, Waterfall, Hybrid. They're all different methodologies, but they all relate to project management. What I like to define it as, it's the application of processes, methodologies, and skills required to achieve specific objectives or deliverables that align to agreed-to criteria within accepted parameters. That's a long way of saying it, lots of words, but it's not the same as day-to-day management tasks, which are ongoing. If you're asked to create a quick report for the day, that's not a project. Because project management works with the triple constraint, which we call time, cost, and scope. The triple constraint, as I say, is time, cost, or budget and scope, and changes to any one of these areas will have an impact on the other. For example, if you have a defined scope and a defined budget, but suddenly you make a change to the time, you have to do it quicker, there's going to be an impact on the quality. You may have to reduce the scope to get it done within that time frame, and you may, or if that doesn't change, you may need more resources, which could increase the cost. So a change to one of these can have an impact on the other. And a project has a defined start and end date with a defined deliverable or set of deliverables. As an example, you may be planning an event, launching a new internal process, or updating a system with multiple teams involved. We start our project January 1st, where we define what it is we're going to do, what we need, how we're going to do it, and it all has to be done, including project closure and lessons learned sessions, by December 31st. That's your start and end. That's a project. With a project, you'll be working with multiple stakeholders or contributors to create that deliverable, the scope, with a defined cost and timeline. If you have all of those in play, you have a project. And as I say, if you're performing daily operational activities, even if it's 1 or 2 days to create a report or get something back for your boss, you don't have a project. Let's look at the basic project management lifecycle. And I'm going to make it real easy here. We're not going to go into the weeds, which I know I definitely could. Our phase 1 is initiation, where we define what success looks like, what it is we're trying to do, what are we going to deliver. Do we have some start and end dates? Then we go through our planning, where we determine how are we going to get everything done within this time frame? How much money do we need? What's our budget? What are the resources required? So we map out our schedule, how we're going to do it. Phase 3 is execution, where we actually do the work we say we're going to do and identified in the planning, along with our schedule, making sure that we're not going over budget, we're heading towards the right direction, managing risks and any issues that occur along the way. Then phase 4 is closure, where we're delivering. We're now shutting things down. We're reassigning resources. We've made sure we're paid all the invoices, and we are closing things down with the lessons learned so that we can better improve things the next time. Throughout all of these 4 phases, we are always monitoring and controlling, keeping things on track, managing the risks that come up, managing any issues that creep in. That is through every phase. And then we move whatever it is we've delivered, a plan, a new application, code, whatever it could be, we move that project and embed that into the organization so it becomes business as usual. And now it's taken over by somebody else in the organization, and you can move on to another project or back to wherever you were before you became a project management manager. When do we use it? When we need structure and when expectations need to be met. Something is to be produced, a process, plan, service, something deliverable that we are delivering to a client, whether that be internal or external. Something complex needs to be addressed. We could have a merger or acquisition. That's going to take multiple teams, and that's going to have a project. Develop team skills. This always helps when you have a project because you will be networking and sharing knowledge with people you probably haven't worked with before, and they probably haven't worked with you before. So you're going to be creating a network of people that really need to understand each other and work well together. And as a project manager, that's part of your role, is to facilitate that. And you definitely want to manage the expectations of all the stakeholders. And we'll talk more about stakeholders very shortly. You want to manage that triple constraint, scope, cost, and schedule. I mentioned that earlier on what happens if you don't. Because what will happen is you can also increase the risk. you can reduce the quality, and you could have too many or not enough resources if you don't manage that triple constraint. There could also be a change within the organization, which is required or projected. So you may need different people involved, different teams involved, and hence the best way to manage that is project management methodologies. You definitely want project management to manage risk because it's more than you realize. And I will touch on risk. That's one of our success factors in a moment. You want to manage to a budget. Make sure you're not going over because companies these days only have so much in their budgets for projects, and going over is not seen as a good thing. And you have a defined timeline. Same thing. If you go over that timeline that you've established, or it's a tight timeline, you're going to want to make sure everything is managed very well to keep on track to make that defined timeline. Because it could be a constraint as well. There could be something being implemented by a government or a regulator, and it's happening on a certain date, and you've got to make sure that everything is ready when that date arrives. Again, you can develop team skills. That's one of the benefits of project management is you create these networks and you get to learn more about your organization. You understand what different teams do and don't do. You meet more people at various levels. You share knowledge. You're learning as well from these people as well as they are learning from you and understand your expectations, including leadership. Manage those constraints. If you have to have everything done by December 31st, that's not going to move if it's a regulatory date or if it's being implemented by one of your vendors. You've got to manage to it. And the benefits of project management is you can help avoid last-minute surprises through risk management, keep everyone aligned by understanding the scope and managing risks, and it helps with faster decision making if everyone is on the same page. You can address the expectations of stakeholders because their expectations are set, and that should be set in phase 1 of your project so that they understand what you're going to do, you understand what they expect. You want to manage the risk to achieve goals and objectives and reduce any roadblocks that might be coming up, and proactively identify these roadblocks that may be there. That's a key point. Don't forget that. A risk isn't something that has occurred. It's something that hasn't occurred, but if it does, could derail you. And of course, project management contributes to operational and organizational resilience. Project management methodologies and the success factors that we're going to touch on in our next section will help you in almost all areas of your organization. Components of successful project management. It could be addressing a need or an ask of executives. We need to change something. We need to fix something. You identify the requirements, your end deliverables, your overall objectives, scope, timeline, roadmap, and how you're going to hand off to business as usual. That management part where you need to control and take ownership and manage those aspects. Doesn't mean you have ownership of every single thing in the project, but you control the management of that project. And of course, you need to secure the funding to be able to do that. Without the funding, you're not going to be able to get too much accomplished because no one's going to work for someone if they're not going to get paid and if their department won't be reimbursed for something. Project managers must have interpersonal skills or soft skills or human skills. Different places will call them something different. And those skills will help foster communication, a collaborative approach amongst teams and team members, help with problem solving, investigating how and new ways to address problems, and it certainly certainly helps with leadership. And as a project manager, people are going to be looking at you as a leader. You don't need to be perfect, just need to be organized. As the project manager, you need to motivate your team members and resources through training, awareness. You have to practice what you're preaching. You can't just give orders. Listen, be adaptable to what's happening, understand concerns and risks that people have, and assign the resources in the right spot. If you're doing a technology development project, obviously you're going to focus on IT, the quality assurance, the testing, but at the same time, you also have to look at the user, the end user of this technology to make sure they understand everything. And having a management plan that outlines how you're going to do that and who needs to be involved along the way. You also need a plan on how you're going to be handing this off to the new owner of that end deliverable. You can't just create a plan or a code and then suddenly hand it off to someone who has not been involved with anything along the way. That will be failure in the end. As a sidebar, you may hear program management at some point. Program management is multiple projects to deliver an end deliverable. This certainly comes into play with large organizations when you have either a merger acquisition, you're creating a new product or service line, and you need to have multiple teams involved. So IT would end up with their own project, deliverables. Marketing may have a set of deliverables that they need to work on. Staffing requirements may need changing or training, hiring processes. A new office or floor may need to be required in your building. So property management or facilities management may need to be involved, and they have all their set of meetings and things they need to deliver and get put in place, and including vendors as well. With a project like that, or where you have a new product or service, you're probably going to have some external vendors involved, helping out along the way with either testing or development or contractors setting up the new office. All these different projects, one person could never handle. So there would be multiple project managers within a program. So that's just a sidebar. We're not going to go into program management, but I wanted you to understand the difference between the two. So let's just have a little bit of fun. Review of section 1. Questions are based on the section here. We don't need to go through too much. I'm going to walk you through all of this instead. I thought I'd make it easier for you. If you want to go through on your own speed, of course, just hit your down arrow back and forth to go and have a look at things. But let's just have some fun. Question 1. A project is defined by its ongoing day-to-day operational activities that have no specific end date. True or false? We'll give you a couple of seconds. And of course, the answer is false. A project has a defined start and end date with defined deliverables. So let's try question 2. What are the 3 elements of the triple constraint in project management? Risk, quality, resources, time, cost, and scope, communication, collaboration, leadership, or planning, execution, and closure. We'll give you a second to look at that. And of course, the answer is B. The triple constraint is identified as time, cost, or budget, some places call it, and scope. Question 3. Which of the following is the correct sequence of the basic project management lifecycle? A. Planning, initiation, closure, execution. B. Execution, planning, initiation, closure. C. Initiation, planning, execution, closure. Or D. Initiation, execution, planning, and closure. And the answer is C. And of course, What's not listed there, but I want to make sure you're aware of, monitoring and control runs across all phases of a project. And the last one, program management refers to managing a single project with a very large budget. True or false? I think you know that one. That's a quick and easy one. And that's false. Project management is the management and coordination of multiple projects to deliver an overall end result and deliverable. So let's move on to part 2, project management success factors, the 5 factors that make or break every project. Success factor number 1, stakeholder management. A stakeholder, to clarify, is anyone with a vested interest in what you're doing. It could be good, it could be bad. They could be internal, they could be external. Either way, what you're doing will have an impact on them. It could be increasing their current workload, it could be decreasing workload, or deactivating or decommissioning a product or service. It could be a vendor on the outside. It could be a regulator. It could be a business partner. Anyone with a vested interest is a stakeholder. And you identify these stakeholders through every phase of your project, because new people may be identified, and some may have more to say at the beginning of a project than involvement they have at the end. They may be heavily involved with planning and initiation, but yet execution or closure, they may not be as heavily involved. I strongly suggest you perform a stakeholder analysis and continually review this as you walk through your phases. Determine and understand the role they play, the what, how, and why the project is important to them, and what it means to them. Never turn around and just say, this is what it means to you. You may have an understanding and you may have that conversation, but really listen to what the impact, the change means, this project, what it means to them, and understand what is happening from their perspective and what they understand of expectations, of risk, deliverables, etc. To do that, create a communication plan. Identify who, what's being communicated, when it's being communicated, why it's being communicated, how. Are you doing it through an email? Are you doing it through a brochure? Are you doing it through a meeting? Who's responsible for creating and disseminating that information? What should be in each message? A daily report needs to have X, Y, and Z contained in it. A monthly report has different information in it. How often are you sending certain informations, like status reports? Frequencies may be different depending on the audience. And to understand all that, create yourself a RACI or a RACI. Sometimes it could all be put together, RACSI, standing for responsible, accountable, contribute, or support, and informed. And just as an FYI, only one person, one role is accountable. There should not be multiple accountable individuals with showing up on your RACI chart. One person is accountable for a schedule. One person is accountable for something else. If it's multiple people, you may have it mixed up with who's responsible to do it. Most importantly, if you don't manage your stakeholders, they will manage you. And that's when you're going to run into issues. Success factor number 2, managing change. Ask yourself some questions. Does it address something? Is this requested change a need or a want? Is it addressing a risk? Is it an action? Is the change that being proposed addressing an issue? Is the change required of a decision that was made by leadership? Does it address a constraint? The scope, resources, budget, schedule, risk, quality, those things that I mentioned earlier on. Not all changes add value. In many cases, a requested change by a vice president, a director, or even a data analyst, it's just a want for them. It's not a need for the project. Describe the change in a change record. Your organization may have a change management process already, or if you have a project management office, they may have a change management process in place where they have a template that needs to be filled out. Make sure that you understand that and follow it and adhere to it, because you need to understand what the impact is of this change. Is it positive or is it negative? If you implement a change, it could be positive because a team is getting what they want. It could be negative because another team suddenly has more work to do. Communicate this request and investigate it. Make sure you address what this change means to everyone. The project manager, and this is very important to understand, the project manager facilitates the change process. The requester owns the change. The one who wants that change, they own it. If you're the project manager, you can help walk them through, have conversations with other teams to identify what the impacts are of this change, what it means to make it, what it means not to make the change, but they own the change. The project manager does not own the change. That's key to remember. Too often, a project manager will take on this change and suddenly is so engrossed in it, other things in the project then fall to the wayside. Let's look at success factor number 3, risk management. Risk is anticipated or perceived activity that may impact the project timeline, budget, quality, scope, resources. Remember that triple constraint? It shows up a lot. Any of those that can be impacted, that could be a risk. And it's owned by the person that has the risk, not the project manager. If my team has a risk of falling behind schedule because of an increase in scope, I own that risk and I have to do what I need to do to make sure I still meet that risk, meet that scope objective. If not, I have to bring that forward as a risk, saying we have a risk here. This is what might happen. And that's key. A risk has not occurred. A risk that has occurred is realized and escalates to an issue. The project manager, you, works with risk owners to address, to identify strategies to either accept the risk, we acknowledge it, it's going to happen. If it does, we'll deal with it when it occurs. Mitigate it, where you come up with actions to ensure that if the risk does occur, there is no impact. Or you could mitigate it to the point where the risk never happens at all because you've addressed the risk. We had a risk that we were going to run out of people. We addressed it because we assigned additional resources. You can avoid the risk, eliminate exposure, but that's costly. We don't want a risk to occur, so we're just going to throw a bunch of money at it to make it go away, or we transfer it. We sign off on something that shifts it to a third party, insurance, as an example. A documented risk should answer, if that occurs, then this will happen, followed by a quantifiable statement that answers, basically, so what? As an example, if the vendor delivers the code late, then there may be an impact on the schedule, which has very little contingency. The implementation date may be missed or renegotiated. So you may mitigate this by constantly working with or increasing meetings with the vendor who's developing this code to understand their progress, if they're on track, what do they need to ensure they meet their objectives, what do you need to do to contribute to them so they can meet their objectives. That's how you deal with a risk. It hasn't occurred yet, so it's not an issue. Proper monitoring and mitigation activities can prevent the impact from ever occurring, so you don't end up with surprising issues coming out of the woodwork. Speaking of issues, success factor number 4, issue management. Issues should only be risks that have been realized. Under very, very few circumstances should issues suddenly appear out of nowhere. They should have previously been identified as a risk, and if unable to be mitigated, then they become an issue. They've occurred. It's happened. An issue that does occur, it's a surprise event, could be a fire in your building. It could be something more dramatic. You have a vendor who's all of a sudden experienced out of the blue a fire, and suddenly they can't deliver for a week because they're reassigning resources to work from home and getting new technology in place. That's an issue that cropped up out of nowhere. They need to be addressed immediately when they've occurred, because that means there's been an impact on one of those items in the triple constraint. Has been an impact, which means your schedule or your cost or your scope, etc., the quality has occurred. There is a tangible impact to what is occurring. So issues should be linked to a risk or a decision. If there's an issue that needs to be resolved and a decision needs to be made, then that decision has to be recorded via change to make sure it's incorporated to address the issue, but then whatever that action required to address the issue is also incorporated into your project, whether your schedule or something, or reducing a scope item because you have a constraint. We'll never get this done in this amount of time. We need to pull something out of scope. Anything along those lines. Again, the project manager, you work with the owner to resolve. Remember, the owner of the risk will now be the owner of the issue. They're the one who has been impacted. So the project manager, you work with them to help resolve it. You help them get to the people they need to speak to, coordinate meetings if you need to, document what the issue is and how you're going to resolve it. You may need a change request to do it. You may need a decision from leadership to resolve the issue. Either way, you help work with them so that their issue gets resolved. A documented issue should clearly state what has happened and what has been impacted. As an example, the vendor has communicated that the code will be delivered 2 weeks late due to an issue on their end. Whatever issue they have is up to them. They should have been using proper risk management. This impacts our implementation date, as we only have 1 week of testing and deployment after receiving the code. So you obviously have an issue. You're going to receive something 2 weeks late, which already puts you beyond your delivery date and has impacted your schedule. So now you have to work with the vendor or teams involved to find out, what do we do? It could be moving the end delivery date by a week so that accommodates the vendor, or it could be telling the vendor, double your resources, we'll pay for it, so that you meet your timelines. But you do whatever you have to do and work with the teams you need to. Success factor number 5, record keeping. The single most valuable asset any project manager can utilize is what I call the RAID clap log. You may just hear it called a RAID log. It's your source of truth, your project brain, and I use it everywhere I go. It helps coordinate activities and remove roadblocks. It doesn't just list a whole bunch of information. You can really trace back where things occur, why things occur, who's making decisions, who owns what, and you can help identify if something keeps occurring in the same area. You can find those trends as well. It's your brain, and it really, really helps you as a project manager. Even if you aren't a project manager, you can use something that we'll go into this in more detail, but you can use the RAID clap log on your end, on your daily activities, and it will help you. It keeps historical accuracy as to when, why something occurred and whether you're on track or not on track. And it's used for reporting purposes, whether to your manager, your program director, your vice president, the CEO. That information, it's a gold mine if you utilize it correctly, and it's going to make you look like a star. It helps manage, like I said, all the constraints and the triple constraint, any date constraints you may have. It will help you focus to stay on track to meet what you need to do. So let's do a review of section 2. Some quick fun here, same thing. You can go through quickly with your down arrow if you wish, or go back using your up arrow, but I'm going to walk you through some of these. Question 5, in project management, the project manager is the owner of a change request and is responsible for justifying why the change is needed. True or false? The answer, of course, is false. The PM facilitates the change process, but the requester, the person who wants the change, owns it. Question 6. What are the 4 strategies for addressing risks in a project? Identify, assess, respond, and monitor. Accept, mitigate, avoid, or transfer. Communicate, investigate, document, and resolve. Or plan, execute, control, and close. The answer is B. Accept, mitigate, avoid, and transfer. Seven, an issue is in project management is a risk that has been realized and has caused a tangible impact to the project schedule, cost, or scope. True or false? I think everyone will get this one correct. It's obviously true. An issue should always be a realized risk, except for extenuating circumstances, which should be very, very, very minimal, if ever. Last question. What does the acronym RAID CLAP stand for in the context of record keeping? Requirements, actions, issues, deliverables, changes, lessons, assumptions, and plans. Risk, actions, issues, decisions, changes, lessons learned, assumptions, and problems. Risks, actions, issues, decisions, changes, lessons learned, assumptions, parking lot. Resources, assumptions, incidents, dependencies, costs, logs, activities, priorities. And the answer is C. Risks, actions, issues, decisions, changes, lessons learned, assumptions, and parking lot. Let's move to part 3, record keeping. This is where we get into more detail about the RAID clap log. This is what's going to make you a huge success in what you do. Risks again have not happened. Actions outside of actions needed to address risks and issues. To address or mitigate risks and issues, you may have a list of actions. Those don't go in here. These are actions that are found in meeting logs where Alex has to schedule a meeting with Betty. That kind of an action. Issues, again, are realized risks. Decisions, all decisions made, including any of those to resolve issues or mitigate risks, or decisions needed to approve or decline change requests, which is the change log. Lessons learned at all phases. I do recommend doing lessons learned at the end of every phase, because by the time you get to closure, many of your resources may have left. And if so, some of the knowledge or things they learned go out the door with them or to the next project. And you get to the end with different members of teams. Half your team are gone, or if it's a very long project, different people are involved. They may not know some of the lessons that were done at the beginning. So I do recommend lessons learned at all phases. Assumptions, which you need to validate. If I'm assuming that a different team is going to complete on such and such a date, or is working with certain team members or a certain version of an application or certain plans, whatever it may be, you need at some point to prove that that is correct. Because I may find that because I was working under a certain assumption, now I'm no longer meeting the expectations or the timelines that were originally set out, because I just assumed someone else was doing something. And parking lot. Topics to be addressed at a later date. Now I'm going to go through all of these in more detail, what you need to record and how they can relate to each other. And this is really key. First, let's talk about risks. A risk entry should contain the following. The ID number. As an example, I put R-001. Give the risk a name, resource requirement, change in scope, whatever it may be, just a couple of words. Then in the risk description, that's where you put your if, then, so what statements. The risk owner, who owns that risk. Remember, it's the person who's impacted by that risk, not the project manager. Mitigation steps, what you're going to do to address that risk. Expected closure date, when you hope to have this mitigated so the risk is addressed and comes off your log. The risk trigger date, this is the date that if you don't meet, that risk now has an impact on your project, which means it becomes an issue. Amended closure date, if by chance you need to move a closure date, we'll be able to see, hey, why is this risk taking so long to be addressed? We've changed our amended closure date. We're 3 times. Originally, we were supposed to be closed on March 31st, and now all of a sudden we're into August 2nd. Why such a long drag here to get this addressed? You want to be able to see that in your report, because that's something that you will be reporting on to leadership. The actual closure date, the date that you did actually expire the risk, meaning that's the way you term it when you close a risk, is expired. It's no longer a risk to your project. Or you want to identify it if it's withdrawn. It's not a risk. We identified it as a risk, but after investigation, we found there is no risk, so we are withdrawing it. Or it's realized. You're realizing the risk to become an issue. And if it's expired, well, that means it's no longer a risk after investigation. Like I said, we don't need it. It's withdrawn. It's expired. We don't need it. It's no longer a risk to our project. Related action entry or decision entry. This is if you have a risk and you need a decision from leadership, your sponsor, to make to approve a certain action. You may need a decision made, so you want to make sure that wherever that decision entry is, and whatever it is, you relate it back to this risk. Then you're able to see the trail. A decision made on this date resolved this action step in the risk, which expired it as a result on this date. That way you can, anywhere along the path, you are then able to identify what's happened with this risk. That's a key success factor. And status, of course, it's withdrawn. We don't need that risk anymore. It's open, meaning it's being investigated. It's expired. The dates have come and gone. It hasn't occurred. We were able to mitigate it. It's expired. It drops off your log, or it's realized it's occurred. We now have an impact. I also want to point out you want to identify your risk trigger date, the date when you're going to have this risk potentially impact your project. Actions, these are the actions that are often taken during minutes. Alex is going to schedule a meeting with Betty as an example, deliver something to another colleague, document a change log, any of those kind of actions. Develop a report for a stakeholder. Alex has an action to draw up a status report for the sponsor, those kind of actions. Or update the project schedule as an action to make sure it's current. In there, you want to have the ID, the action name, just a couple of words so it's easily identifiable. Action description, you can get into more detail here. Expected closure date, when I should have my action done. Amended closure date, so you can see the slide in case it's moving and I'm not getting something done. The actual closure date, when it was actually completed. The action owner, who owns that action. Could be myself, could be one of your colleagues, but whoever is responsible to making sure that that action is completed. This doesn't mean that other people may not be involved to address the action, because I may need to meet with 3 or 4 people to address the action. It doesn't mean we're all owners of that action. I am the person who owns that action, and I have to make sure I meet with whoever I need to make sure it's addressed. Status, it's either open or it's closed and complete. Issues. Remember, an issue should be a realized risk. Again, its own unique ID number, issue name, just a couple of words, issue description, what happened, and what is the impact. If we had an if, then, so what, then now we should say the so what. The vendor did miss delivering the code. Now we have an impact to our schedule. Issue owner, and I've talked about that already. Action steps, what do we need to do to make sure this issue is resolved? Meet with the vendor, identify additional resources, increase cost to pay these new resources so that we meet the timeline. All those different steps need to be tracked. Expected closure date, the issue date, when did it become an issue? When should the issue be resolved? And if it slides, you can see, hey, we had this issue open for this last week. We've changed our closure date. It's moved by another week. So is this really an issue if we're able to move the date? And you can ask these questions. Do we have such a terrible issue if the closure date keeps moving? Do we have the impact we think we have? And was there a related risk or decision or change entry? You want to keep track of it again so that you can see that path. This issue is related to this risk that was realized. We needed this change to help resolve this issue, and that change had to be receive a decision by this person. So all those logs you can track and understand how they all fit together. And the status, of course, if it's open or closed. Decisions. Decisions, important to help remove project roadblocks. The project manager does not make decisions unless authorized. It's the people who are basically paying for the project, the sponsor. Sometimes it could be a department head who in finance needs to make a decision based on a finance issue or a finance focused risk. They need to make a decision. It may need to be to mitigate a risk. It could be approve a change. It could be resolve an issue. But the decision itself is based on the authority that sometimes is identified in the RACI. I've worked on projects where the project manager could approve anything that had a cost under $1,000 and didn't need to go up for approval from the sponsor. We recorded it in the change log where needed, so they were aware of it, but we didn't have to schedule a meeting and go through the long process. Anything above that 1,000, well, then we did have to schedule a meeting with that sponsor and get their approval. A decision entry, the ID number, decision description that was made, the impact of not making that decision, because that could be a risk. So you want to make sure you're clear. If we don't make this decision, this is what's going to happen or may happen. Who makes it? The date the decision was made. It could have been at a meeting. It could be at a special meeting just for this decision. It could be at a change meeting, whatever the date is that decision was made, so that you can associate the change, action, issue, risk number. And I've mentioned that before almost ad nauseum. You're probably bored of me hearing it, but all of these things have to align. And of course, any attachments that may be required to prove the decision was made based on these findings in this report. Attach the report so that then you've got a record of that. Change. Now this is project change, not organizational change or IT change or anything like that. This is focused on your project only. You need to know why a change is required and assess if the change impacts any of the triple constraint. Is it addressing a risk or an issue? Is it required to fix something that has happened in technology? We missed something in our scope. We need to reconfigure a server. Well, then we need to change. We've got to make sure that's in there and it's part of our scope so that it's not missed on our schedule, and then we don't end up with an impact later on. Again, the project manager does not own the change. The person requesting it does. Too often the project manager is just told, I need to get XYZ changed. They have no idea the context. They don't know why the change is being done, and ultimately that creates issues for them and their team members. A change entry should have the change ID number, CR, whatever the number is. Change title, again, just a couple of words. More detailed description of what the change being made is. What does it entail? The date the CR is submitted. The reason for the change is to address risk number 52 or issue number 21. And understand what the impact of the change is. It is changing this document. It is changing this process. It is a change to increase cost to pay for additional resources that are required. It's a change to get approval to move some of our milestones or our end delivery date. It's so that everyone understands and then everyone gets on the same page afterwards. Everyone's working with the same thing. Understand the impacted parties. I've already talked about related risk and issues. Understand who's impacted by this change, positive and negatively. I mentioned that earlier. Some teams may have work reduced, some may have it increased. However, you need to know who's impacted by this change that's being requested. The date it's approved, so that way on that date, if it is approved, then schedules or resource plans or anything else associated with you that you need to make sure is current gets updated as a result of that change. Don't make those changes until that change is approved. Too often that happens, changes get made, and people turn around and go, well, who approved that? When was that approved? And then we've got all kinds of issues. CR status, it's under review. You're still documenting, you're still investigating. It's approved or it's withdrawn. I've seen that where a change has been documented and it's determined afterwards, you know what, we don't need it. Withdraw it. Or it's denied. Sponsor could turn around and say, I am not approving that change because it is requesting an extra $10,000, which we don't have. So that change gets denied. And of course, who approves the change? Sponsor or the program director. It's not usually the project manager unless it's within their level of authority. A lot of times, some of these changes go through a larger change process that may be established. If you're not sure if you have one, ask your project management office or your IT project change or change management process to leverage what's already there. But you're obviously doing it from a project perspective. So you may have an application or a process that's already defined to follow. I'm outlining some of the things that you need to focus on, but don't forget that we don't want to recreate the wheel. You may have something in your organization already to follow. Lessons learned. If nothing changes, nothing is learned. And you want to ask yourself questions. What went well? What could have been done better? What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we continue doing? Did we have the resources required to complete this phase or this project? Was everyone clear on accountabilities and responsibilities? That RACI chart that I mentioned earlier on. Was our decision making timely and effective? And if so, why or why not? Often you may have an issue, but to get a decision, it takes 3 weeks to meet with the sponsor. Well, part of the lessons learned is to find out how you can reduce that so that that issue can be resolved quicker and more timely. And it may relate back to looking at the RACI chart. Maybe you've got the wrong sponsor to approve these. Maybe somebody else can approve a change quicker and get decisions done a lot faster. Remember, when performing a lessons learned, you're assessing plans, processes, and activities. Don't assess people. That's not what you're doing with a lessons learned. You want to make everyone succeed. If you get to the point where you're assessing people, your lessons learned is going to fall apart and it'll turn into a blame session. And I've sat through way too many of those over the years. A lessons learned, what you have in the log, give it an ID number, a description, a component of the item that's associated with it. So it's a scope item. We learned something on the scope. We learned something on the change process. We learned something from our communication plan and identify what it was. And you have all that associated and documented. And then that information hopefully goes to the next project management or your project management office, who can take those lessons learned, review, and hopefully implement those changes. It could be a change required to a process. It could be a change required to a plan that was followed but was out of date. So the lesson learned is we need to make sure that plan is up to date all the time so that when another project comes along and looks at it, they're not going to go through the same issue or the same troubles that we went through. Remember, if nothing changes, nothing is learned. Assumptions. Why an assumption log? Well, everybody works with them, whether you know it or not. And you've got to revisit them all the time. I could be delivering a specific deliverable, a plan, a document, code, a server, but I'm assuming somebody else already knows what to do with it when I give it to them. Yet, I've never had a conversation with that other team, so they're assuming that something else on me that I'm going to reach out to them. So we're both working with assumptions, and then you know what happens? Nothing happens. So you want to track anything like that to make sure that you look at them, and that's through all phases of the project. make sure you capture your assumptions. And it helps identify potential doubts and possible impacts to your project, to your deliverables, to your teams, to your schedules, etc. That triple constraint. If you don't identify them and don't address them, you're setting yourself up for some problems. In your assumptions log, an ID number, describe the assumption. What is it? What are the possible ramifications if it's not true? Because sometimes if you identify an assumption that you believe is true and it's not, again, you're going to run into issues. Who's making this assumption, and why did they make that assumption? Are they making an assumption so they can move forward with their activities? If so, you still need to address it. Make sure that that's still true. Date the assumption was made, and give yourself a follow-up date so that you know further down the road, we've been working with this one assumption for a month. Let's make sure that it's still valid and we don't have any changes or anything we should be aware of. Parking lot. Parking lots contain items that don't need addressing at the moment, and sometimes don't need addressing at all by the project, but they were brought forward as topics that may need to be addressed at some other point in a different project, or at the end, or maybe in a different phase of your project. Don't ignore them, because if you forget something in phase 1 that was brought forward, you may get to execution, phase 3, where people are working, and someone's going to say, is anyone working on XYZ? And you're going to get a lot of strange looks in the room going, what are you talking about? And that's going to have an impact on you. So keep track of parking lot items. What do you want to track with that? Give it an ID number. Describe what the parking lot item is, why it's on hold. Maybe it's the wrong phase to be looked at. Maybe it's not something for the current project. Who brought it forward? Because somebody had to have asked. It could be a finance person, it could be a technology person. The date when it was identified, and give it an expected date when it may be addressed. I gave the example, you could be in phase 3 for something that was identified in phase 1. So you want to make sure that this parking lot item, you've looked at it before you start executing activities. So a recap: success factors, stakeholders, and stakeholder management. Manage change, manage risk, address issues, and record all of this information with good record keeping. Review section 3, same thing, go back and forth with your arrow keys. A couple of quick questions. In the RAID clap log, what does actions category track? Steps taken to mitigate risks and resolve issues, general project activities outside of actions tied to risks, issues, or changes, all decisions made by the project sponsor, assumptions that need to be validated. I think everyone's got the answer to this one. Actions in the RAID clap log are not actions to address risk, actions, and issues. They're the ones you take from meetings, like scheduling a meeting or sending a file to somebody. Number 10, the risk owner in a project is always the project manager, since they are responsible for managing the overall project. True or false? Everyone's going to get this one right. And that's false, of course. The risk owner is the person that is impacted by the risk, not the project manager. And that's key. Always remember that one. You don't own the risk. You are facilitating the process, but you don't own the risk. When conducting a lessons learned review, what should the assessment focus on? Individual team member performance and accountability, plans, processes, and activities, only items that went wrong during the project, budget overruns, and schedule delays exclusively. The answer is B. Plans, processes, and activities. Don't assess people. You may, part of your assessment may include what went wrong, but also address what went right. Because those success factors, among all the other things we've talked about, you can carry over to your next project. And if you do those things that went well for you in another project, it'll make your next project even more successful. Last question. Items placed in the parking lot are no longer relevant to the project and can be permanently disregarded. True or false? The answer is false. Parking lot items don't need addressing at the moment, but they may need to be addressed by the end or before the end of your project, or could be an item that needs to be transferred over to somebody else to look at in a different project. Because it came up, it could be a part of a different phase of a project that might need to be done later on. But never lose sight of something that falls in the parking lot item, parking lot log, because it was brought forward for a reason. Project management tips, the do's and don'ts. Don't skip planning by running towards execution. I'm a firm believer planning should be a large section of your project, whatever you're doing. The better planning, more planning you do, the smoother and easier your execution and closure will go. Do think of the roadmap and how you'll get there, part of planning. Think of all the different spots where you have touch points, that become your milestones, places you want to get to in certain times. Think of your roadmap. It's important. Don't skip the importance of milestones along the way. That'll help you recalibrate when you meet one milestone. Are we still on track to meet the next one? Do we need to recalibrate? Do we need a change to fix something? Do we have a risk? So don't skip the importance of milestones along the way. And there can be celebratory spots too. Our project has multiple phases. We just completed phase 1. Celebrate it. Do control the narrative. Don't let everyone start asking what ifs, what ifs. They may ask the questions, but they could be asking questions that are simply out of scope. You're asking questions that are out of scope. You're asking questions that have nothing to do with this project. Those could become parking lot items. Don't forget that though, because there's nothing wrong with asking the question, but control the narrative. If you start investigating all these what ifs, you could then take your team off track. Don't accept vague requests. Ask clarifying questions. We need to change this. Well, what does that mean? Find out why they're saying that. What's the reason for that? So ask the clarifying questions to understand. They could be just saying that because they don't want to do the work. Do document decisions. This is key. Memory is not a strategy. If you get down further into your project, executing or implementing, and someone just says, oh yeah, well, the decision was made about such and such, and it's caused you issues at the end. I mentioned that earlier. So document your decisions. Know when they were made, know who made them, and know why that decision was made. Don't just accept every change. Do the homework. Investigate the impacts. Understand if that change is a need or a want, if it addresses a risk, an issue, but don't just accept it because somebody wants something changed. Do ask leadership for decisions and decision support when needed. If there is a decision that needs to be made, make sure you're approaching your leadership or your project sponsor with alternatives. Give them options. These are the decisions. We can go this way, or this way. Option A, B, or C. Don't expect them to do all the work. They're busy. You're not their only project manager. So if you're expecting leadership to provide decisions and decision support, make sure you show up to them with options. Then they can help determine which is the best option, or they may even combine something or come up with something different in your meeting as well. Hey, option A and C, if we put those together, that's the better road to go. Don't get caught up in scope creep, the wants versus the needs. It's very easy to say, oh, we'll just do this added little piece. It doesn't mean anything. You don't know that. One day, there's a saying I like, one day every pebble hits the beach. Well, if all the pebbles hit the beach, look how big the beach becomes. So if you accept all these little requests and these tiny little things that people are asking for, that can grow into one big scope creep that you can't manage anymore and could offset you to where you really need to go. Do think of risk as an opportunity. Just because you have a risk doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I have been on projects where risks were identified, and when we went to have decisions made or investigate mitigation activities, we found we were able to address a reoccurring problem, a reoccurring risk, over and over and over again for years. And we found that by really addressing this risk, we had an opportunity to fix something. And we did, and leadership was very happy about it. So don't see risk as something bad. It's always something good. It's like identifying the pothole ahead of time and knowing how to drive around it before it's too late. In conclusion, leverage these 5 project management success factors because they hand you control of your project and your initiative. And as I said before, you don't have to be in a project to leverage these success factors. You will be able to help manage your stakeholders with whatever initiative you're working on. Doesn't have to be a project. Manage their expectations. If you understand what they want and what they're expecting, and you can manage it and stay on that path, then they are going to see you as just phenomenal. You can better enhance your communications with them and all the people that you're working with, and with teams that you may not normally have any relationship with, but you will be able to establish something with them. You'll be able to stabilize changes when people ask, I want this, we need that. You'll have a process in place that identifies, is that really a change? Is it really necessary? And it'll keep everyone on track. All these success factors are tools you and your team can leverage to create success. So let's look at the outcomes. At this point, do we understand what a project is? I think so. We've had an overview of the project management lifecycle at a high level. We know the 5 key success factors. We're able to stay organized with record keeping. We can now better communicate with stakeholders because we have all that information in our record keeping, our RAID clap log, using those 5 success factors. And we're better able to manage risks, issues, and change with confidence because you've got proof. Project management isn't about complexity, it's about creating clarity, strong communications, and control. Start small. I challenge you, pick one tool from this session and begin your journey of success. And I guarantee you will see a change in yourself and how your management and leadership view you. You will become a success. References and disclaimers. All images in here were created by Microsoft Copilot, Except slide 3, navigating the course, that's provided by Microsoft stock images. All information is taken from my personal experiences. Any similarities to anything else, any other course, is purely coincidental because this is all based on my own experiences over 30 years. And I did not use any artificial intelligence to create content. It's all me. And with that, thank you very much for attending Successful Project Management for Non-Project Managers.